So, hello everyone. I'm Abeer and I welcome you today to NIB's relationship series. Today we are going to have an in-depth conversation on toxic relationships between parents and their children. We have today Ms. Sonal Bavadekar, a clinical and school psychologist joining us. She's been working in this field for the past 15 years and we are really pleased to have you here today, ma'am. So moving on to our
Thank you
topic
so
for
much, Abeer.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to our topic for the day. The scarring and the hurt that comes from a toxic parent probably isn't something that we talk about enough. None of us are perfect, including our parents, but there is a point at which the imperfect becomes destructive. So, ma'am, how would you define said relationship?
So, Abeer, when we say toxic, we need to understand what a toxic relationship really looks like. So, we know that all of our relationships with our parents, or even for a matter, friendships, are not really rosy and happy all the time because obviously, with parents, we come from different perspectives, different upbringing, and the generation gap does tend to play a huge role in the relationship. But toxicity is basically when the parent is temperamental, critical, highly judgmental, disrespectful, and that environment basically leads you to feel invalidated or shamed or unloved by your parents. Now, this behavior is harmful and tends to leave a lot of scars, very similar to what abuse does. But abuse and toxicity are not the same thing. So we need to understand that difference. So physical abuse is a huge threat to our well-being and obviously our safety. It's a danger. But not all toxic relationships are physically abusive, right? So a toxic parent can apply to those caregivers who probably have personality disorders or mental illnesses, substance abuse, or have had damaging childhoods which they carry forward into their children's lives. So because of which they become extremely controlling and threatening. So that is how I will define a toxic parent-child relationship or a toxic parent.
Okay, so what are some of the signs that we as children should look out for?
So, I would just focus upon the major ones. The first and foremost one is overreacting. So we all tend to react or overreact at many a times, but toxic parents would overreact and dramatize it to such an extent that it would become hysterical. They tend to play the victim. So you end up, after the argument, you end up feeling that, oh my God, it was my fault when it really wasn't our fault to begin with. Right? They use a lot of emotional blackmail into coaxing the child into doing something that they want them to do. The second sign that you can look at for is that they're extremely critical. They tend to compare, they tend to control, and they gaslight a lot of times. So they want to tell you what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And when they don't have the upper hand, they will obviously, strike upon criticism. They will compare you, and this comparison is not just to make you, feel motivated or pushed into doing something, but it is to make you feel really low. They can see that it's bad, but they still end up doing it. So nothing that you do is ever good enough. And putting their child down all the time while playing themselves up is the norm. So statements like, what do you know? You are nothing. Or, do you know who you're talking to? Are the norm. They also are not receptive emotionally. So most of them are emotionally unavailable. They don't understand how to be empathetic. Their needs always come first. They're expert manipulators who disregard others' feelings and enforce their ideas upon the child. They are also not open to listening and will always criticize no matter how good you are. So I heard a lot of parents saying, I have this plan for my child and he or she will walk that path, no questions asked, right? That to some extent I understand is okay because you have a vision for your child. But when you pressurize and criticize and control your child into doing something, that is when it turns toxic. Or things like boys don't cry, stop being like your sister, don't show your emotions because people will use them against you. All these are ways in which they make it very difficult to be who they are. They disrespect boundaries. They do not understand the concept of boundaries at all, and every relationship demands boundaries. So they deserve to know everything that is happening in your life. They want to control you with money, and to some extent, a lot of parents do use that, but this is when every argument begins and ends with, I pay for you, so you work this way. No matter what, your feelings, your ideas, your emotions don't count, right? So, another thing that they are very like a sign of toxic parents is they're disrespectful, they're extremely aggressive, they're never happy, and they're constantly demanding. And a very subtle kind of a trait is competitiveness. For some reason, they feel that they need to be better than the child. I see a lot of mothers doing this to, girls or daughters when they enter their puberty. When somebody praises their daughter and says, "Oh, she looks so pretty," or "She's going to become a really beautiful woman," they immediately feel threatened. And this behavior makes the child feel really low. It tends to kind of create self-doubt. So, of course, being an embarrassment to children because of their addiction or their attention seeking behavior in public or trying to make everything about them is something that makes the child feel scared or threatened at home because they don't know, how their parents will react, right? These some of the classic signs of toxic parents.
Okay, so basically there is a difference between controlling behavior where the parent keeps checking their child's phone or their social media or reading like their diaries and journals, and being toxic. So those are two separate things.
Yes, they definitely are. Because here the intention matters, right? So a lot of children seem disturbed, unfocused, or evasive, and this makes parents extremely uncomfortable. Because for parents, they are supposed to be the protectors. They are supposed to safeguard the children from things. And sometimes, parents can help you out through a lot of situations. So if they are invading your privacy because you are being evasive or not sharing your life with them, then somewhere you need to evaluate your own behavior and maybe share some of your life with them. I'm not saying share every minute detail or give them access to your phone, but technically you should be able to share the important part of your life so that they don't snoop. Trust me, most parents will stop this once you build a positive and healthy sharing relationships. But toxic parents will not understand this, right? Their controlling behavior comes from a place where they want to control you. They want to say that you cannot speak to a particular person. They want to tell you whether to have a relationship with somebody or not, and the reasoning isn't justifiable enough, right? They want to be critical, cruel, and they want to use whatever they find on you, whether it's social media or their phone, to basically hurt you, right? And that is not the intention of controlling parents. The intention of controlling parents is to protect you, right? So that is the difference between toxic parenting and controlling behavior, right?
Okay.
And I feel that basically, sorry
No,
to
it's
interrupt,
okay. Go.
but sometimes I feel that it's important that you need to call out these parents and tell them that this is what you're doing and this is what you're making me feel. And if a parent is understanding, empathetic, then the parent obviously will understand how threatened you're feeling or how bad you're feeling that they're invading your privacy, right? And they will understand, they will come from empathy, which a toxic parent will not understand. They will again use it against you, right?
Okay, and what would be some of the psychological impact of toxic parenting on a child?
That as Indians, we're taught that pushing, comparison, criticism, and celebrating only big wins are the way to parent a child or discipline a child. And we don't understand the effects of that on the child because that is how we've been brought up, or most people have been brought up. So whenever I conduct parenting workshops, I have this constant question that, "Apula kai vaid jhala?" Or, literally like, what went wrong with us? Right? We are perfect the way we are, and we had to deal with parents who were doing that to us. But the question here is, are we really happy? Did we really do what we wanted to do? Did we really realize our full potential? And yes, sometimes people are fine, they have evolved, they have come out of that criticism and control, but there are many others who have suffered because of this toxicity. Of course, kids today are changing, so we need to change our approach as concerns them as well. But on an average, children who have a toxic environment growing up, or those whose parents kind of project their own insecurities or fears or ideals on their children, will not only be more susceptible to mental illnesses, but also face issues like low self-esteem, self-doubt, attention-seeking behavior, internalizing a lot of their thoughts and emotions, which leads to a lot of psychological issues like anxiety and depression. They learn not to invest in relationships because they know that nothing is going to come out of that relationship. They are not going to feel safe and secure, or they go the other way, that they fall in love with every person who gives them attention. And which is why then they have relationships that are not really worthwhile. And this comes from a place of feeling validated and loved, right? A need which isn't satisfied on the home front, so you go outside and seek it, right? Constant criticism can also lead them to doubt themselves, how they live, and basically they close up to sharing and speaking out. They also might feel that this dysfunction is how life is supposed to be. So they also kind of start working with that, living with that, and following the same behavior in all of their relationships. So a lot of parents believe that physical punishment like hitting or pinching or locking kids in the bathroom or withdrawing food are ways to discipline kids. Unfortunately, this way of discipline will not only make the child resent you more and become more rebellious, but they will also use the same kind of behavior to deal with their other relationships. So if you're hearing that your child is going out and hitting somebody, you need to kind of look back into how you are dealing with things, right? I'm not saying all parents hit and that is where their children learn it, but you need to reflect upon where they're getting this behavior from, because children as young as 3 can understand whether a reaction is worth learning or not based on the consequences. So in families where parents argue unnecessarily or excessively in front of their children, or hit or use swear words, kids think that okay, this is great, this kind of manipulation, this kind of behavior is perfect because my parent does it, and my parent for me is God. So if they get away with it, then I should also be getting away with it. And that's how they're learning this behavior, which they'll apply, right? So I understand that parenting is very difficult, and I would love for children to come with instruction manuals that just open, and that is how you get to know how to deal with them, but they don't, right? But parents can definitely benefit from either seeking professional help or sharing their concerns with other parents or teachers or even relatives or friends who can understand them, because the psychological damage of toxicity is something that you cannot really work with in the future. It's going to damage you to a huge extent, right? And the problems will keep coming up throughout your relationships, throughout your work, and throughout your life in general.
Okay, so once the child does realize that they are in this toxic relationship, how do they deal with or heal from this situation?
So, if you're talking about physical abuse, unfortunately, it very literally is a trauma. And to recover from that trauma takes you a long time. It will take you a lot of therapy, it will take you a lot of counseling, and it will take you a lot of accepting and forgiveness, right? So, it's a huge process. As for the psychological impact, there are ways in which we can ensure that we don't repeat the same patterns that our parents have kind of lived with, right? And yet deal with the consequences of the toxic childhood environment. Now, obviously, the tips that I'm sharing here, Abeer, are for when you're living with your parents, right? If you're living away from your parents and you know that it's a toxic relationship and it's not serving you anymore, as an adult, you can make the choice to either establish boundaries or to make sure that your parent understands that you will not deal with them until they change their behavior, right? So the tips, again, like I'm saying, are for when you're living with your parents. So the first thing that you can do is, again, work on yourself. Work on understanding the triggers. right? Many children learn over a period of time to make themselves scarce when their parents come home. Either they are drunk, or their the rooms are obviously kept clean because that is an obvious trigger for the parent to get angry, or they basically do whatever chores that have to be done so that the parent doesn't get aggressive. So these are the triggers that they've identified is how a parent would react. And hence, even before the triggers happen, the child can basically work on reducing that trigger. Right? So one thing is to identifying the triggers that lead their parents to overreacting or sometimes even hitting. Also, understanding the triggers will help them not only to avoid it, but also to some extent protect themselves from it. Yeah, so it's like a temporary band-aid, but it does work. In fact, a lot of my clients have identified the triggers in a trigger diary, and they actually work on those triggers so as to avoid the overreaction or the constant fights or the hitting part that happens, right? The second thing that they can do is understand that it is not your fault. It is not the child's fault that this has happened. So you need to understand that you cannot change your parents' behavior. They are who they are. Yes, you can call them out on their behavior, but you cannot change how they will respond. So a lot of children tend to blame themselves for it. Things like I had it coming, or wish I hadn't done that, or if only I was a better person, my parents wouldn't react this way. So these are the limiting behaviors that we need to realize, and we need to rise above them. You have to understand that again, you are not your parent. You can break these patterns and move ahead, right? Learn self control. You are responsible for your emotions and how you choose to react to what your parents say or do. If you're feeling overwhelmed or threatened, you can call out your parents. You can tell them that, okay, this is what they're making you feel. You also have an obvious choice of not reacting at that point in time, because we all know that in when you react, one thing leads to another. It's like an argument. It's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another and everything comes crashing. So if you control your own reactions, you will be able to stay calm and you will be able to take whatever they say to you. Trust me, their entire behavior is based on irking you, on irritating you and getting a response from you. Right? So if you don't respond, they will probably lose interest in doing whatever they want to do. Right? Another thing that I would say is rationalization does not work with toxic parents because they are not in a mood to listen. So what you can do is, if you can, leave the situation. It's okay if you don't have a dialogue with your parent at that point in time. You literally step back and leave that room, and you can inform your parents that, okay, right now is not a good time because both of us are very upset. So I think we need to take some time off. And this is something that older children can probably do much better than younger children, unfortunately. But we can teach the children to work this way. So when in schools, counselors basically work with children who come from abusive backgrounds, and they teach them how they can take a break and they can, work on themselves. The next thing is you need to schedule time to deal with your own emotions. Now, when it comes to toxic parents, there are a lot of emotions and feelings that are all over the place, and nobody knows what to do with them. So these pent up emotions are projected upon the school, the peers, workplaces, or relationships. So instead, if you maintain a journal, you blog, you use exercise, dance, or any kind of a hobby that you have to basically address your emotions, to vent whatever you're feeling in a healthy manner, you're channelizing all that unproductivity or all that, the feeling of being everything being out of your control. You're able to channelize them into something good, right? This also helps you understand that all emotions are completely normal, and it's absolutely okay to cry it out. You don't have to hold on to your emotions. It's okay to just let them go. And that is very important, because the more you stay with that parent, the more it makes you angry, the more it makes you sad. So it's important that you address these emotions. The next is to create social support. Whenever you feel threatened or you feel that this is not a safe space, you need to have somebody that you can open up to. You need to have somebody that you can kind of go and stay with, so that your parent can calm down and then you can come back, right? I know that's always not possible, because most families, especially in India, you don't want to tell your friends that this is what you're dealing with, right? So I do get that. But you can always create a space with your friend where you tell somebody who's non judgmental or accepting that, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. And sometimes I might come to you and I might need you to just listen. I don't need you to inform anybody, I don't need you to do anything, but just listen to what I have to say. Just listen to where I'm coming from and just help me kind of deal with whatever I'm facing, right? So you need to create these kind of spaces wherein it could be relatives, it could be friends, it could be anybody who's basically ready to listen. That is very important. And this will basically help you when you reach a breaking point, right? Because relatives or friends might be mediators, but most importantly, they will be your support, right? Also, obviously, most toxic parents make you feel as if you are unlovable. So you need to tell yourself, you need to keep reminding yourself that you are worth it. You are important. You may not be as important to your parents, but you are important. You have work to do. You've been put here to, kind of um, contribute in some way, right? Also, becoming financially independent is one thing that children can do. So, a lot of children who are 18 plus and whose parents keep telling them all the time that, money is the one thing that, okay, they are manipulating their child with, the child can become financially independent. Once they become financially independent, that hold will reduce, right? The toxicity will reduce. Plus, you will feel a sense of empowerment, which is what most children don't feel, right? So most children coming from toxic homes feel helpless, hopeless, because they feel there's no way out of it. So to feel empowered, this is one very important thing. Dealing with stress, being in that situation is extremely stressful. I can't even imagine how bad it can be, right? How bad it can get. But you need to create spaces to de-stress, which can be simply going out for a walk. I know with the lockdown, a lot of children and parents are stuck together and it's becoming extremely overwhelming. So it could be something as simple as going to the terrace and walking, or just climbing the stairs up and down, or just going to wherever you are staying. You can just take a walk and come back, right? It is as simple as that, but at least you're out of that situation, right? You can make connections with people. You can basically, like I said, your friend doesn't have to understand where you're coming from, but at least they will empathize, right? They will be there for you, right? And all of these distractions will work for de-stressing you. Also, you can seek professional help. Now, the reason that I've kept it as the last point is that most people hesitate to seek professional help because they feel that, okay, it's not a big deal, I'll be able to deal with it. And it's fantastic. If you're able to deal with it, that's okay. But sometimes it's just plain difficult to manage your feelings, or to kind of respond to the world in general. You're so overwhelmed that you can't really see beyond it, and friends and family are always there for you. They will always keep making suggestions, but here a professional counselor will have a third person perspective to what you have to say, right? And again, there are many agencies like Childline, or there are many NGOs, as well as the help of police can be sought if you feel that your parent is hitting you unnecessarily, or your parent is using hitting as a discipline strategy. Abroad it's fantastic that you can involve the child and family services and the child is put into a safe space. Here we don't have that kind of a thing, but help is available if only you seek it. You have to remember that you do not have to suffer. Yes, they are your parents, and yes, they may be dealing with their own problems, which is why they are behaving in a toxic manner. But at the same time, you have to open up and seek help. There's a very wonderful quote that I would like to end this particular self-help thing with. It says, a ship will sink not on its own, but only if the outside water gets into it. Similarly, if you have the ability to not allow that toxicity to impact you and change you who you are, you will be a better person. You will be a person who will be more resilient. Yes, again, the impact does happen, but with journaling, with reflection, with social support, with professional help, with reminders like you are worthy of love, you are a good person, this is not your fault, and many others, even positive affirmations work brilliantly. You will basically become a ship that is so resilient that no matter how much somebody keeps pushing water into it, you still manage to kind of stay afloat. So that's one thing that I would like to say.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your undivided attention. It was really great, and I hope this video helps out our viewers. And to all the viewers out there, if anyone has any concerns or comments, too, please do get in touch with us. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Abeer.